attendance here in council chambers this evening. Want to thank everyone for, one, being here with us, and also want to thank many folks for their preparation for tonight's hearing. Our presenters specifically representatives from the departments, including Assistant Director for Growth Policy from the Department of Economic Development, Mr. Kevin Wheeler, and Chief Counsel from the City Attorney's Office, Laura Baker-Morrish. Appreciate you all being here and presenting to council this evening. Also want to thank my colleagues, Councilmember Emmanuel Remy for being with us, and certainly Council President Hardin, who is co-hosting tonight's hearing with me. Also want to thank the council staff, CTV, and members of the public for taking time to be here in council chambers tonight or viewing virtually at home. The purpose of this hearing is to review and comment on proposed amendments to Columbus City Code Chapter 3310 and related sections of our zoning code. These amendments set forth the procedural steps that will be required to codify changes to our zoning map as the Zone In initiative proceeds. As many folks know, and if you're here watching this evening, you're probably aware that the Zone In initiative is a multi-phase effort to comprehensively update Columbus's zoning code and map for the first time in more than 70 years. A draft proposal for Phase 1, the corridor phases of our code update, is expected to be released for public comment in early April. Again, I want to make clear, as I know we've heard from some members of the public about some confusion over what exactly we're reviewing tonight. Tonight we are not reviewing the code itself or the map. Tonight we are again reviewing the legislative changes that are necessary for us to proceed with that code and map as we get closer to those being released to the public. Again, if you're tuning in tonight, this hearing is streaming live on CTV and Council's Facebook and YouTube pages, and they'll also be both on our YouTube and Facebook pages following the event. With that, I want to turn it over to my council colleague, Council President Hardin, for any remarks before we begin tonight's presentations. Council President?
Thank you so much, President Pro Tem Dorans, for your leadership of this committee and the leadership of the work as we go through this process with our zoning rewrite. I want to start off by reiterating and reinforcing a few important things as we get started this afternoon. First, our zoning code is over 70 years old. It reflects outdated and harmful ideas about growth, about inclusion, and a car-centric development in city. For us to grow into our future, to make room for hundreds of thousands of new neighbors in the decades to come, to meaningfully address our housing crisis, we absolutely need to update the zoning code. However, we are not doing this lightly, and today is not a consideration of a new zoning code, as Pres Pro Tem said. Today is simply about the orderly process we're going to put in place to make sure that as we consider changes to the zoning code, that we are gathering and utilizing public input in a way that is transparent and meaningful. So for folks who are just starting to pay attention to this process, that's great. You're tuning in at the right time. Over the next few months, we will have plenty of conversations, plenty of opportunities to hear proposals from the administration and get feedback from residents and community leaders. So I'm excited for this work to begin, and I'm thankful to everyone who has helped get us to this historic point, including the City Attorney's Office, and certainly Kevin Wheeler and everyone in Department of Development, and the Department of Building and Zoning Services, and everyone here at Council as we move this historic conversation forward. So thank you, Pres Pro Tem. Look forward to this hearing.
Thank you, Council President. I did want to pause and see if Councilmember Remy had any comments you'd like to make this time.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to echo the Council President's sentiments and certainly thank the department and Laura Baker-Morrish for all the work that you've done to make this happen. At least to get us to this point, we still have a long way to go, but this has been a monumental effort and incredibly necessary for the growing city that Columbus, Ohio is, to continue to grow in a smart, sustainable way. And so this is the first steps in that process. So thank you for the chair for all the work that you've put into this, and certainly looking forward to public feedback as we continue to move the ball forward in something that is incredibly critical to the ultimate success of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Remy. And to reiterate a couple points from my colleagues. So again, here tonight, we are not commenting on the code or the maps that will be released early next month. But again, I do want to take a moment again to talk about process. We're literally here to talk about process, about legislative process. We're talking about 13,000 different parcels that have been identified through the phase 1 of the zoning initiative. If you tune in on council on Monday nights, you see us move literally parcel by parcel when a rezoning comes to us or a variance. It would be rather impractical for us to have 13,000 pieces of legislation for us to be able to move forward in a process like this. So what we're here to do tonight is review how we're going to approach that portion of this initiative. And to Council President's point, when we talk about something as fundamental as zoning, it reflects what the current conditions of a neighborhood are and what they'll be in the future. We know that is something that so many of our residents have already been engaged on, but now is really the time for folks that are interested in this initiative really to take note of where things are headed. And in that spirit of transparency, this is going to be the first of a number of different council hearings. So again, literally tonight, we're here to talk about process. We will have a number of hearings after that code and map is released in early April for members of the public to come down to comment on that. Certainly to be engaged with council, for the opportunity for folks that have been working extremely hard, both internally at the city and some of our external partners on those code changes and map proposals. This will, the endeavor that we always talk about is, we can, certainly disagree about the details, but we're going to make sure we're being transparent and the process is right. And my goal as chair of the zoning committee is making sure that we're being incredibly transparent with the public about what is being proposed, why it is being proposed, and certainly allowing the opportunity for members of the public to comment on those proposals as we consider legislation before council this year. So with that, I'd love to now turn the floor over to Assistant Director for Growth Policy from the Department of Economic Development, Mr. Kevin Wheeler, to give us a quick update on where things stand holistically with the zoning initiative before we move to the State Attorney's Office, again, to get into sort of the meat tonight around these legislative changes.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Chair Dorans, Council President Hardin, Councilmember Remy. Pleased to be here. I will just take a few minutes, as you said, to give an update of where we're at right now. We are working very hard to finalize a public review draft of the code that, as you mentioned earlier, will be coming out in early April. And we have, as we've done this work, kept our eye on a series of priorities that this council supported in the fall of last year. One is to leverage the corridors to create more housing in more places. Critical at this point in time when our region is short on housing supply, and that shortage is getting is growing over time as we continue to attract new jobs. Another priority is to support our Main Street jobs and businesses. We're at a time now where we haven't updated our zoning code, as was mentioned earlier, for 70 years. And even though there's been incremental change, the comprehensive update hasn't occurred. And so one of the things that we see is that we have commercial zoning patterns that reflect an era when we walk to the corner store, not an era where Amazon is the second biggest retailer. Moving towards a more equitable city by making it easier for small-scale business owners and developers to operate as well as other folks, to invest in the neighborhoods and the community, as well as providing, again, more housing choices in more places, which is about equity as well. Expanding the role of corridors to create healthy, connected communities. One of the things that folks tell us over and over again is they want walkable neighborhoods with better transit, and there's a direct link between the built environment and transit. And then finally, fostering good urban design. One of the things that we know is that this is a city that's had some great success with development, great success with neighborhoods and our built environment, and we want to keep that, we want to maintain that momentum. Moving forward, the review draft that will be coming out soon will have a series of mixed-use districts, a range of districts that will vary in intensity, height, setback, things like that, use, permitted uses, and so on. The code will be reflected as a map. There will be an updated map. It'll be on our website. You'll be able to find your parcel if you have a parcel of interest or a parcel near your neighborhood, find out what the district is for that parcel and what the associated standards are. It will include an affordability bonus. As we look at some of the districts will include an affordability bonus in the form of additional height. And we'll also have a series of objective design standards, things like massing and articulation standards that will be in place for these to guide development, to provide guardrails around design. We'll have an updated approach to parking as well. So all these things will be in the code. It'll be on the map. These things will be on our website as we move to the public review draft release in April. I know that my colleague Laura Baker-Morris will talk about the stages associated with a public review, but we will have a public review period. We will I mentioned our website, we'll be updating our website, we'll be providing briefings and press conferences. We have a pretty extensive email and social media footprint. We'll be taking advantage of that. We're going to be doing a mailing to property owners to remind folks. This follows up, I should have said earlier, this follows up on a major mailing that we did last fall. We actually have had, I think, 10 public meetings, 60,000 visits to our website. We had over 6,000 completed surveys on our survey that we did in the fall as well. So lots and lots of public outreach and engagement already. We'll be building on that as we go to the public review draft stage. And then, finally, and this is particularly, I think, exciting, sorry, I'm kind of behind on my slides, but we are working on an interactive gallery, a zone-in gallery at 141 North Front Street. This is going to be in the community room of the city's garage, so there'll be free parking for folks who want to drive, and it's also very accessible for transit. But we'll have that space open during the entire public review period. So if you're a property owner and you want to come down and understand more about what's happening, or you're a community person, or no matter what your interest is, you'll be able to come down. We'll have evening hours and some Saturday hours and lots of options to learn more about the code, what led to it, what the priorities are, what we heard, and then ultimately what does it say. So if you're watching or if you're here tonight and you want to learn more, in the meantime, and you're not already getting emails from us, you can go to our website and sign up. You can give us a call. You can email us, and we'll take down your information or track that and make sure that we get back out to you so that you can follow along. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. So a couple questions, and then I'm going to pause and see if my colleagues have any. So again, I'm going to try and stick with as many sort of process questions here, because we don't have a code, we don't have a map in front of us here to sort of react to. So again, tonight's here is more focused on sort of the process elements that have sort of brought us here. But again, a question on sort of transparency and some of the things you've mentioned here. So when the map and code is released, again, we're talking about 13,000 different parcels. What is the sort of the best way for a resident to sort of find out what the potential zoning change would look like on one of those parcels in their neighborhood, or potentially a parcel that they own themselves? Sure.
So probably, I think that a lot of people will start out with the website. That'll have the actual map on it. The map will be interactive. You'll be able to search for your parcel and find out what the proposed updated district is, and then by clicking on that, you'll be able to be connected to the sort of basic guidelines that apply to that district. You'll also have the opportunity to comment directly on the map, provide your comment that way. You can also look at the associated code, because of course zoning is two things. It's a map and it's a code. And so we'll have the code on the website as well. I think that, one of the reasons that we encourage folks to try the gallery or check out the gallery is because we're going to have staff there that can answer your questions, or at least, do their best to kind of help you understand the implications of the update. We're going to have a lot of exhibits there to give you an opportunity to sort of see it firsthand. Code is not the easiest thing always to work through. So we're going to give you opportunities to comment on the web, but also at the gallery. And I think for folks who work during the day, again, we'll have evening options. We'll have some Saturday times as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And one thing I wanted to emphasize on that point is because currently our zoning code is more restrictive in nature. It's more about what you can't do on a particular piece of property. The code we're moving towards is more a code that has more flexibility built within it. So it's not prescribing, you can only do one thing on this piece of property, and if you don't want to do that one thing, you're going to have to come to council to get a rezoning or a variance. And I think that's really important for potential residents really to utilize that gallery, because again, you will have professionals from the city there really to explain the range of different types of mixed uses that could go on that parcel to better understand, again, because the intent is to have more flexibility. So it does not require, a minor deviation. You need to come before this body in order to get a rezoning or a variance, which could add, potential years to a project. So just a word for residents when you think about, whether or not you're getting notice in the mail or whether or not you're tuning in tonight and saying, hey, I want to better understand, this parcel is now X, Y, and Z district, and that changes, what does that change really mean? That's really going to be the opportunity to have a real back and forth with somebody to really walk you through on a real practical level, what does that look like for that, piece of property that maybe you own or is in your neighborhood. Mr. Wheeler, could you talk a little bit about, we have a lot of different area commissioners. These are the official advisory body to Columbus City Council for purposes of rezonings. They have for decades been sort of the first line from a neighborhood standpoint of engagement on these issues. So could you talk a little bit about how the process for involving them in the zoning initiative has happened to date, and sort of what the plan is moving forward as we get closer to releasing a code and a map?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Dorans. We have done a series of visits to the area commissions throughout this process, area commissions as well as the major civic associations, to kind of bring them up to speed where we're at the different stages of the work. We're doing another round now. We've started it, I believe, already, or we'll soon be starting it in the next week or two, providing the sort of the overview, or will be providing the overview of the public review draft material, and making ourselves available in that setting to answer questions as we can. And we'll also be scheduling a series of sort of open houses for area commissions, not to come down as an individual commission, but for commissioners to come down on any one of a number of times, so that they're having a firsthand opportunity to learn about this. So we've tried to keep folks in the loop all along with respect to the area commissions and major civics, and we're going to continue doing that.
Thank you. I do want to pause and see if any of my council colleagues have any questions for Mr. Wheeler at this time. Thank you. With that, we'd love to switch gears and turn the floor over to Chief Counsel Laura Baker Morris to talk about the proposed amendments to Chapter 3310 of our current zoning code and how that fits into sort of the zone-in initiative here. This is something that, again, as I mentioned in my opening comments, when we're talking about 13,000 different parcels, this is going to be very different compared to what normally goes on at council on Monday nights zoning committee hearings. So that is sort of the reason why we're considering legislative changes before us today. And I do want to thank you and everyone at the city attorney's office for really diving into this with us. Again, having not, no one at the city's ever done this before, so we're sort of building the airplane as we fly a little bit on sort of how to approach this legislatively, and would love to have you inform the public a little bit more about what those legislative proposals look like that'll come before this body.
Well, thank you, Chair Dorans, Council President Hardin, Councilmember Remy, for the opportunity to speak with you this evening regarding some exciting changes to our city code. I say that with a little bit of sarcasm only because I know process probably only gets a few of us lawyer types excited. But the opportunities that the particular code changes I'm going to talk about tonight certainly are exciting for the city. And what I was going to do this evening is kind of give you an overview of what the changes to Chapter 3310 and related statutes are going to allow the council to do as relates to the zone-in initiative. So the first thing I'm going to start talking about is how we are actually creating a new title of the Columbus City Codes. So the Columbus City Codes is a series of codes that have been codified in various titles located within the Columbus City Codes as a collective group. And currently, everything relating to zoning, to the actual zoning districts that exist today in the city of Columbus, are located in Title 33 of the Columbus City Codes. Because, as Kevin Wheeler has just spoken about so eloquently, the zone-in initiative is going to create districts that are significantly different in terms of how they describe zoning and the allowances that they are going to allow for different properties. We felt that it was important for those things to be put into its own section of the Columbus City Codes. So it's going to result in a new Title 34. So in order to get from where we are now, which is Title 33 and the zoning code that describes the current zone designations within the city, to Title 34, which is going to be the 2024 zoning code and the new district designations that are encompassed by the zone and initiative, we have to figure out both how to enact that new Title 34 as well as to physically move the properties from this in the zoning map from one district designation in 33 to a district designation in 34. So as Kevin mentioned earlier, there's both a zoning code and a zoning map. And what we have up here on the in the slide is a reflection of the current zoning map for the city of Columbus with an overlay for the proposed zone-in initiative corridors, which consist of the zone-in Phase 1 series of properties. So I want to talk a little bit about phasing. The reason that we crafted the legislation that you're considering here in 3310 is because the zone-in initiative is kind of being built out in phases. The intention is that over time, Title 34 will become the city's active zoning code. But we're going to do it in groups. So instead of the entirety of the city being rezoned in one action, instead, because of the council priorities that Kevin discussed, we're starting first with the corridor areas. And so those properties are being brought over in a group and being removed from Title 33 designations and rezoned into Title 34 designations. As the plan moves forward, there will be another phase that will include properties that are located outside of the corridor areas. They might have different district designations depending upon what is a best use of that particular property in that particular part of town. At the same time then, that phase will come through the same process that I'm going to describe here tonight. It will also have public hearings. It'll also have public meetings. It'll also have opportunity for public comment. And it will proceed, again, as a group of properties through the zoning process. So as Councilmember Chair Dorans mentioned, currently when we rezone property, it tends to be on a property-by-property basis. Maybe a couple parcels at most get rezoned all at one time. Here, since we're doing 13,000 properties and we anticipate that subsequent phases will likewise be groups of properties, we wanted to create a process by which we made sure that all of the relevant boards, commissions, public, everyone had the opportunity to provide comment, but that they could provide it more globally as to the entire phase rather than to individual pieces of property. The other thing is that we are creating new code at the same time. And so we wanted to make sure that the update to the digital zoning map and the update to the code walked hand in hand. So we're essentially moving from Title III through this new rezoning process that we're going to discuss tonight and into Title 34, which will be the 2024 zoning code district. In order to do that, the first thing we have to do, because lawyers just love definitions, is define what we're doing. And so we have to first describe what the new Title 34 is going to be in order to distinguish it from the existing zoning code. Couldn't call them both zoning code. So we had to create some sort of way to describe one versus the other so that we could be clear and individuals have an understanding of which zoning code is applicable to their property and applicable to their process. We also had to make sure that we were clear that even though we're going to have two different kinds of designations, ones that are in the existing code as well as ones that are going into the 2024 zoning code, that they are all going to be existing on the same digital zoning map. So in other words, we're not creating a new map. Instead, what we are doing is rezoning properties in phases on the existing map into the new designations. So when we talk about the zoning map and the zoning districts, we then had to make sure within 3309 that we also clarified that that zoning map did or does what I just described, that it also includes the 2024 zoning code and the zoning code districts that are defined in the 2024 zoning code. Those zoning districts, we also had to then make sure that the section that talks about districts also includes and makes reference to the Title 34 zoning code as well as the Title 33 code. Now, something to kind of pause and talk about here, and I'll talk about it again in the next slide as well, because we are moving parcels in phases, and we are also kind of filling out Title 34 at the same time in those phases. Title 34 is largely a shell for all of what the zoning code will be. So we're going to have all the district designations for Title 34 described. We're going to have photographs in some instances and diagrams of what those different mixed-use developments look like and what the design standards are. But a lot of the processes that we use here in the city in order to process requests for variance, requests for building permits, requests for rezonings, all of those things are still going to live in Title 33 for a period of time. And the reason for that is because most of the properties in Columbus are still going to be governed by 33 until they too are part of a phase that then moves their property designation into Title 34. So you can almost literally think about it like there's an empty Title 34 that we are filling up each time we move in phases. And we are filling it up both with properties that are being redesignated or rezoned, as well as the code that's necessary in order to describe what those new design districts are going to look like. And as we do that over time, then we will also start to transfer some of the processes from Title 33 to Title 34. So when we're talking about rezoning, I know people are going to have a lot of questions about, well, how will this impact my particular property? And so this slide and the next series of slides are designed to describe what will or will not happen regarding rezoning requests for a variety of different property circumstances. So in the city, we currently have 3 ways of rezoning a property. You can file an application if you're the property owner and you want to change the use of your property, or if you want to sell your property and develop it in a certain way, you can file an application and seek to have your property rezoned into another property. We process those kinds of applications, the hundreds, thousands of them per year. If your property is not in the Phase 1 zone and initiative, this process will not change for you. It'll be the same as it has always been, and it will continue to be the same so long as you are still governed by Title 33. There are 2 other ways of rezoning property currently. The department can make a proposal and can come before BZA and the council and make a request that a particular property be rezoned for a particular purpose. And the council, of course, on your own initiative, you can initiate a code change that will rezone a property from one district designation to another. All 3 of those property rezoning possibilities will continue to exist and will continue to live in Title 33 for any properties that are not part of the zone in Phase 1. Okay. Similarly, if you are in a property that gets rezoned to Title 34, and if you are seeking a rezoning of your Title 34 property, each one of those processes will also still apply to you. In other words, the process from Title 33 will be the same. If you feel that you've been rezoned into a zoning district in Title 34 and you have a new use that you want to have considered, you will follow the process from 33. There's one difference. Once your property has been rezoned from a Title 33 zoning code to a Title 34 2024 zoning code, you can't go back. So you can be rezoned into another district designation in 34 if that's appropriate. You could certainly seek to have that done. But once you're in 34, you're governed by 34, even though there might be certain processes that will still live in 33. So the big question is, though, what about the phased properties then that are moving from 33 to 34? And that's most of what we're going to talk about here this evening. So the next couple of slides fully describe how we go from properties that are rezoning within 33 to 33 and properties that are in 34 going to 34. What these different provisions do is basically describe what I just discussed. And so in order to allow for that process to occur, we had to go back into 33-1001. This is the section that talks about rezoning by application. And we had to make it clear that if you are in a Title 33 district, you can still keep doing it this way. And if you're in a Title 34 district, then you can only be rezoned upon application to another Title 34 district. And that's stated here that you cannot basically go back to 33. Same thing with departmental proposals. We had to amend 33-1003B in order to make it clear that the department also cannot make a recommendation to have you go from 34 back to 33. And finally, we also put in here, and of course council can amend this, but again, in order to encourage the continued movement from Title 33 to 34, we also, as relates to council initiatives that are not part of the zone-in phase process, it would still follow the existing council initiative process, but there's also a statement here, a positive statement, that once you're in 34, you're not going to go back to 33. So that brings us to the zone-in. There is only one way for a property to move from a Title 33 designation to a Title 34 designation. And the only way for that to occur is through the zone-in phasing process. The reason for that is, of course, because the department wants to make sure that it's taken into consideration all of the planning considerations that are important, and making sure that we have a sustainable urban plan that deals with equity and deals with a provision of services. And so we want to do that in a very deliberate sort of way. And so the council, the pieces of property that you're seeing before you now in phase one, there's been an extensive amount of time by city planners making determinations as to what makes the most sense based upon usage, based upon projections for future uses, based upon transportation corridors and everything along those lines. And so as a result, as we're moving from 33 to 34, the intention, at least at this point, is that they be done in phases and it be done pursuant to this new process that we're creating in 3310. So when we're talking about 3310-02, the council initiative to amend the zoning map, this is a reflection of what I just said, that it's going to be done through this new process. It's going to amend the map at the same time, and we're going to deal with notice and opportunity to be heard in the next couple of slides. And there are basically 6 steps to get from the beginning of the process to rezone in a phase to the point where council actually votes upon legislation to actually change and amend the zoning map, and possibly at that same time to adopt the new zoning code that goes along with it. We're going to walk through each one of these steps, but these are the general topics. Council adopts a resolution indicating a rezoning phase is going to be initiated. The comment period begins, which will be a minimum of 60 days. There'll be a minimum of 2 public meetings. Again, there can always be more if you choose. Comments will be received from the public, city boards and commissions. Council will have another public meeting to consider those comments and to allow for additional testimony to be given. So there's an opportunity to have a dialogue and discussion about all of the feedback that you've received. And then council may make a determination as to whether or not to introduce legislation to amend the zoning map in accordance with the phase 1 and or subsequent phases proposals. So I'm going to walk through each one of these in a little bit more detail. But I promised I wouldn't actually read legislation because that's like watching paint dry. But step one, passing a resolution. So council had already passed a resolution back in October of 2023, generally adopting the zone-in initiative as the policy that the council is embarking upon to rezone from Title 33 to Title 34. This just takes that up and indicates an intention to move to another phase. So in this case, it's anticipated that the council will receive from the planning department, from the building and zoning services department, and any other relevant departments that might be implicated by the next phase, a packet of information that will contain the actual parcels that are being recommended to be rezoned from the Title 33 zoning designations to the Title 34 designations, as well as if the Title 34 designations don't yet exist, which in this case, they're also being enacted at the same time, you would also get the proposal regarding what those district designations are going to be. So the council will have the opportunity to see fully what is being recommended and why, what the various parcels are. As Mr. Wheeler's already indicated, there will be an online opportunity. You can actually go to the same website and look at any individual parcel. But you will also actually be provided the relevant parcel numbers and the description of what those district designations are going to look like. If council receives that information and believes that it's appropriate at that point in time to move forward to consider that particular proposal, then council will initiate that phase. And the way that council will initiate that phase is by adopting a resolution indicating the intention to move forward with, in this case, phase one. But if in a year or so, if you're looking at the next group of properties, then you would do the same thing to initiate phase two. It's important to adopt a resolution because the resolution starts the time running for when individuals have an opportunity to provide public comment, which is stage 2 of the process, or step 2 of the process. So we wanted to make sure there was at least 2 months, 60 days for individuals to comment, but that can always be more. If there's a determination that there were more questions, you can extend it. If it feels right and you think that we've hit the nail on the head, then 60 days is enough for everybody to have an opportunity to provide comment. Step 3 is a minimum of 2 public meetings. It's contemplated that these public meetings will occur during that 60-day public comment period so that there's an opportunity for that dialogue back and forth as individuals are looking at their parcels online or have questions, or if there's area commissions that want to raise questions with the council, there's an opportunity during these public meetings to have those kinds of conversations and dialogue and to get additional information. Speaking of area commissions, there's a specific reference in the proposed amendment to deal with area commissions, Historic Resources Commission, the Development Commission, and any other applicable reviewing bodies of the zoning code. They shall be provided the proposed supporting documentation and materials that we just discussed. They will have the opportunity during that 60-day comment period to provide any comments or observations that they might have. It may be that an area commission receives that information and decides to hold an area commission meeting during that 60 days. If they do, they can have that conversation then during that meeting and then provide their comments to council in a way that they feel appropriate. Or it may be that area commission members or development commission members want to come down to the zone-in gallery and have a more personal conversation with the members of the department and ask some questions there. Either way, they will also have that at least 60 days period of time to prepare and review and to provide comments. Next, step 5 is council has the public meeting to review those comments. Again, this is going to be the more formal type of public hearing that you're kind of thinking about, where people can come down and testify, and council is receiving the information that they have been getting over the last 60 some odd days, and kind of taking it up and asking questions and thinking about, are there things that there are suggested amendments, or there are other considerations that you want to take in. This is an opportunity to do that. And then step 6 is council makes the determination to introduce legislation. And then once this occurs, this follows the normal legislative path as any other piece of legislation would follow. And certainly for the zoning code amendments, they follow the normal path that you would follow after you have gone through this in order to adopt them and to become part of city code going forward. So really, the amendments that we're talking about tonight to 3310 and related statutes are designed to basically make sure everybody has that opportunity for notice, or an opportunity to be heard, and to see what it is that council is considering during that period of time. There are a few other questions that are addressed in 3310, and in some instances, they're addressed a little bit more in 2024, the new zoning code, and you'll see that language as it gets provided by the department. But one question that we've already heard is, well, what about existing structures and uses? What if my property is currently zoned in a certain way and I use it that way, and when I go to look on the map, the intention is under the 2024 zoning code that it will have a different district designation that maybe doesn't contemplate that use. And so what we can say here in 3310 is that there's an acknowledgement that that might be the circumstance, and that there's an intention in 2024 zoning code to address those what we call non-conforming uses. And essentially it means that if you were lawfully having that structure or using it in that way at the time that it changed, then you're going to be able to continue to lawfully use it that way unless you change its use, or unless you change something noticeable about the structure. So more of those details will come out in the 2024 zoning code itself, but this is an intention and an expression here and an acknowledgement that we're aware that it's something that needs to be addressed, and it's a reflection that we're going to treat it as a non-conforming use. Although we might look at whether or not we call it that, we're definitely going to acknowledge that at the time that you were using it, it was lawful. The other question that we've been asked is, what about pending applications? What if I've already submitted now to the Building and Zoning Department a request for a building permit, or I've submitted a site plan and I'm already moving forward? So the answer is, if you've submitted that and you've submitted an application that is complete, in other words, you didn't just submit your name, you actually submitted an application with a request, and you do that before the legislation goes into effect, then you will follow Title 33. So any of the requirements under 33 will still apply to you. Now, if you get a building permit under 33 and that building permit expires, or if you decide you want to change that plan in a substantive way, then you would not follow 33, then you would be required to follow 34. So essentially means the law that applies to you at the time you make the application is the law that is in existence at that point in time. Now, if you applied under 33 and it turns out your property's rezoned to 34 and it's actually more advantageous for you under 34, that's certainly a conversation you can have with the department in order to see whether or not you can voluntarily go under 34, okay? But otherwise, you're under 33. Oh, and there's a slide that just says everything I just said. Sorry. The last thing that the legislation does is it makes some minor tweaks to the duties of the Development Commission in order to make it clear that once something is moved into Title 34 under the 2024 zoning code, that those duties that they already have as to Title 33 will also continue to and expand to include duties that they will then have under 2024 in the zoning code. And that is, in a nutshell, everything that is before you for this initial vote.
Thank you, Chief Counsel. I want to pause and see if my colleagues have any questions for Chief Counsel Baker Morse at this point.
Thank you, Chair. I probably shouldn't speak because the last point was the one question that I had was for those folks, and so thank you for walking us through. Thank you, Chair. But for those folks who, we're talking about parcels that live under 33 now and understanding that we're moving to 34, but wanted to slow down for all those applicants who are in the process now. And I think that you walked through that really thoughtfully and clearly. But I know that folks have been asking those questions. That, well, where do I stand now if I have an application before us? So understanding that you come in under 33, unless and if there are opportunities to talk to the department. Is that explain that again one more time?
Yeah,
that if
that's
it makes
correct.
sense, we can put.
Correct. No, that's correct, President Hardin. So it would only apply, first of all, the consideration would only apply if in fact the property that you had under application is in one of the districts that's designated as part of a phase. So if you're not part of a phase, you're just under 33. If you have submitted an application and you are identified, your property is identified as being part of a phase that's before council, then yes, you would continue to follow the law as it was at the time you submitted your complete application. However, if it's more advantageous, maybe the design standards are a little bit more flexible under Title 34. We've certainly been having conversations with the department about the ability to essentially volunteer to be under 34, and or you could always withdraw and resubmit under Title 34.
Thank you, Director, or thank you, Chief Counsel.
Councilmember Marie. I also wanted to pause and acknowledge Councilmember White has joined us as well in council chambers. Chief Counsel, a couple of questions, and I think these are more points for just, I think your presentation was very clear, but these are sort of the questions that have sort of popped up to my office to date, particularly around sort of the process changes as they're sort of described going from 33 to 34. And again, I think this is going to sort of restate a lot of the presentation that's already happened. So one, while there's some minor changes that are contemplated here with regard to the Development Commission, this does not address any change with regard to area commission's roles under Columbus City Code currently as an advisory body to council for zoning, correct?
No, that is correct.
And as we talked about those different parcels, one of the things that we hear fairly frequently when we have a rezoning at council is, we have the legislative action before us, and there's a significant amount of sort of bureaucratic processes that then come into action after we approve or a piece of legislation. So it has to go to the Department of Building and Zoning Services for a variety of site plan compliance, has to go to the Department of Public Utilities for demonstrate they can mitigate floods on the property, sort of, et cetera, et cetera. All those kinds of things that an applicant currently has to go through, which are sort of aligned next to a rezoning, but they're not the same thing. But again, and this is easy to confuse because again, when you think about the reason that something is changing in that property, it's because a change in zoning's occurred.
Right.
But typically that is happening because someone intends to build something on that property. And because of that, you have to go get a building permit. You have to, again, demonstrate a variety of things with departments with regard to stormwater, sort of, et cetera, et cetera. All those processes that exist at the city that are, again, run parallel to the zoning process, those are not touched by this legislation, correct?
That is correct. And I think an important comment about your statement is that they run parallel. So if it is directly connected to the fact of the rezoning, like as you just discussed, you have to get stormwater, you have to get a permit, then yes, it would go along with this rezoning and it would follow Title 33 if you filed it under Title 33. If it's something that, 4 years later you decide you want to do something different, that's a different question.
And just again to clarify, because we are talking about changing zoning districts. So the mere fact that we're changing a zoning district would not then require that property owner to go through those parallel processes because they're not contemplating a change of use or a change of building in that property, right? Because what I don't want to have folks here is that, well, wait a minute, you've just said there's all these processes that folks need to go through parallel to rezoning, and you're just telling me that this property is going to go through rezoning through the zoning initiative. So, I now have to go to utilities, I now have to go the answer to that is no. This
Correct.
legislation does not contemplate contemplate that, and I wanted just you to sort of address that.
No, that's absolutely correct. And that's the other aspect of what I commented on in terms of existing structures and existing uses. So even though your base zoning, and that's kind of a term of art, your base zoning has been redesignated, so you are in the new zone. If you were lawfully using it before, then you can continue to use it in the way that you have or have the structure that you have. The question will become over time when you go to change that use or change the structure.
Thank you. And so there's several different timelines that are built into this legislation for public comment and other things, but to make very clear, there's not a requirement that council takes a vote on any piece of legislation as it relates to the zoning initiative at any particular time period, correct?
That's correct.
So, this body, so again, required that, we adopt the legislation that's before us, the subject of this hearing. We have to have several hearings. Again, there's a variety of things that will happen in addition to that, many of which Mr. Wheeler addressed earlier in his comments. But council does not have to act by a specified date based upon what we have before us.
That's correct. There's a minimum amount of time, but not a definitive time that the council has to act.
Right. And with regard to how we've structured this in different phases, the legislation is essentially, sort of contemplated when we're talking about, as Mr. Wheeler opened his comments with sort of phase one here. So we're talking about these 13,000 parcels that are on the first phase that are primarily in corridors within the city. This would be, again, to be very clear, the same type of process that we would adopt if, in fact, we looked at doing additional phases of zoning, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Matter of fact, you use the same process that we're adopting now. It would just be a subsequent resolution to initiate the next phase.
So again, the same types of hearing requirements, the same types of, and again, my expectation of certainly the departments would be the same type of other outreach that would occur beyond what we'd be requiring ourselves to follow in the code.
Yes, and that's contemplated by the fact that the departments will be providing council documentation about which parcels and all of those things, and that's why it's being done in this way. You're getting a lot of more additional information in these phases, and it's all related back to the zoning initiative, which itself has a great deal of policy and planning work behind it.
Okay. And I think my last question, so again, to really beat to death this issue of sort of transparency for folks. So what is the city required to do? So we're not the only city that has gone through this type of initiative, in the Midwest or across the country. From a notification standpoint, what is sort of the legal requirements that are placed upon the city to do this? We follow this and sort of the rezonings that we have before us every Monday night. But again, this is a much larger scale of that. So you could sort of walk us through legally sort of what typically the requirements are for the city on this and how that translates to the zoning initiative in front of us.
So at bottom, the notice and opportunity to be heard needs to be provided by the council. And that can mean a variety of different things. Obviously, if there are existing codes in place, then those codes need to be followed. And what council is doing here tonight is contemplating the process and codifying that process. And so council will need to follow its process. But the process that you're contemplating for adoption is to provide the public general opportunity to know about the fact that a rezoning is going to occur and general opportunity to come and comment before council should they choose.
Thank you.
It is at bottom a legislative act.
Okay, thank you. I did want to pause and see if Mr. Wheeler had any additional comments before we move to public testimony. I see vigorous head shakes while he goes for a button on the microphone, so thank you. I did want to mention, and again, I want to thank you both for your presentations tonight. I think it's helpful, and again, sort of grounding ourselves about, there's a couple of really big things that are happening, but again, the crux of the hearing tonight was really to talk about Chief Counsel Baker Morris's sort of the legislative structure that's going to get us to what ultimately comes before this body for a vote, and I really appreciate the thoroughness, but also sort of the compare and contrast between 33 and 34, because this is a fairly complex thing to do while we also have rezonings and variances currently pending before the body. So it's difficult to completely change the process while we're still months off likely from a vote on how we're going to change things. So thank you both for that. Did want to mention we received 3 pieces of written testimony on this topic from residents. Those will be provided to all council offices. I appreciate the time it took for those residents to reach out to us and appreciate all 3 of those pieces of testimony were in favor of the legislation that is before council on this topic. We did have one public speaker signed up to speak tonight. I'd like to call them to the podium, Mr. Jared Cape. Welcome to council, sir. Typically, we give folks 3 minutes, but we've got plenty of time here tonight. So if you just want to introduce yourself, let us know if you're here speaking on behalf of any organization, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, so I'm Jared Cape. I am the Secretary of the Short North Civic Association. I'm speaking on my own behalf. Thank you all for being here. Growing up in a small town, whenever I was in a meeting, they'd ask me, what do I want to see out of the town? And they never liked the answer, zoning change. But walkability, jobs, housing, clearly important topics. I appreciate y'all doing work, whether it's on the Linkus Initiative, the Zone In, Bike Plus, all of that clearly interrelated topics. We're talking about process here today. I'm in favor of the process outlined. I'm excited to go and engage with hierarchical zoning, form-based codes, lot sizes and all of that in that process. I'd like to extend an invitation to come to the Civic Association. We can chat about that at another point in time. And then the other thing is I'd just like to kind of bring up the topic of building codes and how that also plays in for topics such as requiring 2 staircases over a certain building height, as that feels like it factors in but is not necessarily underlined in this process. So happy to answer any questions, chat, but hopefully just want to kind of keep this brief and start a dialogue.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Cape. Thanks for being here and appreciate that. I saw Mr. Wheeler taking a note while you were speaking, so I think there's going to be a number of folks that are involved with the zone initiative at the city who are going to be going out. I think first in most of the area commissions, and then we'll be trying to get to as many of the civics as possible, but certainly those that would like to have a representative from the city to come out to talk about this. Again, as you talked about, this can be a very dense, sometimes I don't find it boring at all. Some people think it's boring, but sort of a topic that it lends itself, I think, to more of an explainer versus, here's just one handout and go from there. So appreciate you being here and sharing those comments and the invite. And I do want to say on the building code aspect, so there has been, I think, a lot of discussions with the building and zoning services around, again, talk about parallel topics, so it's not necessarily zoning, but they have, I think, reviewed, so the city has typically adopted the state building code. There are ways for us to, I think, amend our own code. There are some limitations based upon what the state requires of us, but I think the particular thing you mentioned is something that has been discussed at the city itself around how that potentially adds additional costs to buildings, which then translate into higher rents or higher sales costs. So those things are certainly being discussed within the city, and certainly would love advocates to bring more of those ideas to the city.
Appreciate it.
Yep, thank you. Well, with that, as I mentioned, we had a number of written testimonies, which we'll provide to the offices, but again, I want to thank our presenters and everyone who worked to bring today's hearing together, members of the public that have joined us here in chambers, and those who have participated virtually. I want to thank council staff for getting us ready for this hearing tonight. John Oswalt from the Legislative Research Office, Amy McDonald and Kevin McCain from my staff, and certainly Mark Carter from the CTV team for allowing this hearing to be streamed virtually. This was very helpful. Again, I think this can be somewhat of a dense topic, but I appreciate both of our presenters doing their best to really allow members of the public to understand legislatively how this is coming before the body, and I look forward to the ability for us to react to a draft code and map in the coming weeks. And as I said at the outset of tonight's hearing, the goal here is for us to make sure that we're being as transparent with members of the public as we possibly can be, because there's nothing more personal than what these changes could make changes to folks' neighborhoods. This is ultimately what is going to shape the future of Columbus, how we're going to grow, and how that's going to translate out to these places that people call home. The amendments we've talked about here tonight are set for the City Council's agenda for a vote on Monday, March 25th, 2024. If members of the public have questions or comments on that legislation, I encourage them to email me. My email is Dorans, D-O-R-A-N-S, @columbus.gov. If you're looking for more information about the zoning initiative generally, or wish to schedule a tour of the zoning gallery, you can find information at columbus.gov/zoning update. Council will hold, as I mentioned, additional hearings on this topic as we head towards the release of that map and code, and to ensure that members of the public have the opportunity to comment and really better understand what is going to be coming before the body in this first phase of zone in. And the intention certainly is not for this to end with this first phase, but it's important for us to set the stage for how this initiative is going to move forward into future months and future years. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their presence here tonight and adjourn this hearing. Have a good evening.